Hello and welcome to your program, People, Politics and Power. Fresh and exciting on Africa Independent Television, AIT. People, Politics and Power is a program rebranded and refocused to forge a consensus on every national issue and build a cohesive, indissoluble and prosperous nation. We have been engaging with the vexed issue of restructuring against the growing agitation that we should restructure Nigeria. That word has stuck and the beat just refuses to fizzle out. That is why we still beam our focus on restructuring, because we need to build a consensus. But how do we go about it and where do we start? Today on the program, we will deal with the endless journey from the Willink Commission, headed by a panel commissioned in September 1957 to look into fears expressed by minority ethnic groups that the colonial imposed political structure would lead to the domination of the majority groups or the domination of the minority groups by the majority ethnic groups in the three regions of Nigeria. You know them, the Northeast, West. And my name is Okiria Agbonsuremi, and we welcome you again to the program. We have reached out to the former Secretary Pro-NACO Constitutional Drafting Committee, a legal practitioner and General Secretary of the Lower Niger Congress, LNC, Tony Nnadi, who will interrogate this issue, the subject of restructuring and how we should indeed go. We have been dealing with this subject for some time now. But let's first take some views from political stakeholders on calls for restructuring in Nigeria. We have the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar and Emeka Anyaoku during a summit held in Abuja.
We had a very long period of authoritarian rule in Nigeria ending in 1999. The legacy of that period is still with us, as can be seen in our various governance institutions. Indeed, even elements of that authoritarian past still wield power and influence in our country as we try to transition from that legacy. Also, the structure of our economy is such that the state remains the most important source of economic opportunity. And that's where there is intense struggle to occupy those institutions. This heightens the struggle for state power and helps to shape the relationship between parties and members, among parties, and among the various arms of government. It is therefore a huge challenge to democratize governance and the political parties in our country. This is the challenge we face. But as the theme of this conference makes clear, internal democracy in our political parties is very important for the parties, their members, and for the country. The absence of it, that is internal democracy in our parties, is a major reason why our democracy remains fragile and why the quality of leadership that we produce has not matched our expectations and the challenges facing us as a nation. It is also one of the reasons why it has been very difficult to hold leaders accountable. Internal party democracy is important enough that it was one of the areas addressed by the Electoral Reform Committee headed by Justice Muhammad Lawal Wise many years ago. But we know that power wielders hardly voluntarily enlarge the democratic space because they don't want to leave power. That is why I have often opinion that internal party democracy will only come with genuine electoral reforms in the country. Such reforms, broadly along the Justice West Committee recommendations, which will further strengthen the independence of INEC and ensure that votes count, will encourage parties to field popular candidates in elections, and in turn will encourage parties to allow internal democracy so members have the freedom to choose and express their opinions. Thus, the role of godfathers and executive intrusion in the affairs of parties and elections will be diminished. In my view, there is a close relationship between democracy within political parties and democracy within the nation itself. Put simply, you cannot give what you don't have. You cannot build democracy on a substructure of dictatorship and intolerance. A political party that constricts the freedom of its members cannot really offer freedom to the citizens of the nation. Can it? No. Democracy is not just an idea. It is a cultural practice. For a number of years now, we have had political parties, even governing ones, which hardly hold meetings of their important organs, including those meant for the democratic selection of their leadership, or even constitute institutions prescribed in their constitution. Did you hear me? In the absence of those meetings and elections, their existing leadership, often under the direction of the executive at the state or federal level, they feel the void. If there is void, they feel it. That is not party building, but party bullying. Ever since the creation of this country out of diverse peoples, cultures, histories, and geographies, we have had our differences and conflicts. And early in our history, we tried to resolve those differences through negotiations and compromises. Our resolutions were never perfect, but they didn't have to be. We are human beings. Human relationships evolve. Like the chairman said, they change as they seek perfection. Our diversity encouraged our founding leaders to opt for a federal system of government which they hoped would allow the federating regions the space to control their resources and to develop at their own paces according to their peculiar situations. We have moved away from that. That is why we are in trouble. At a point in our history, those negotiations and compromises broke down, and we had a military takeover of power and subsequently fought a civil war. Military rule and the civil war led to the steady erosion of our federal structure. The increasing centralization of power and concentration of resources at the federal level in the context of rising oil revenues and neglect of other revenue sources weakened and relatively impoverished the states. As Vice President and Chairman of the National Council of Privatization, I saw firsthand what an overly centralized federal government can do wrong. Having confiscated the bulk of national revenues, the federal government proceeded to insert itself in a dominant manner in virtually every aspect of our national life, including the economy, where it became an investor in all manner of businesses, rather than facilitating the emergence of a vibrant and thriving private sector. Although we have succeeded in privatizing many public enterprises, we still engage in what I call institutional escapism and duplication or multiplication. What I mean by that, rather than fix existing challenges in existing ministries and departments, we create new ones to carry out the same functions as the existing ones. And I keep on hearing government say, we have set up a committee to rationalize federal government agencies and so on and so forth, but we are still back to where we are. If the Federal Ministry of Works, for instance, is not functioning well, we create FAMA. So, what is the difference between Ministry of Works and what FAMA does? They say they maintain roads. So what is the Federal Ministry of Works going to do? If the police is not doing well with respect to traffic management, we create Federal Road Safety Corps. So we engage more people, and that's why all our money is going to personal emoluments, like the chairman said. Again, we create a civil defense corps in response to police shortcomings in providing security, rather than decentralizing the police, among other reforms. The list goes on and on and on. When the states realized that they cannot create their own police forces under the Constitution, they started creating also their own traffic police. They call them traffic police. That's all what most of them do. We claim that state governments would abuse state police, yet we hypocritically accept their donations of equipment and funds to the police commands in their states, pretending we don't know that those donations have, relational consequences. Of course, if the governor gives and equips the police equipment and everything, anything he wants to do, he calls on the commissioner of police, this is what I want you to do, and he does. As you deliberate, there are three things, panelists, I suggest you pay serious attention to. One, people have a constitutional right to peacefully agitate for restructuring. So focus on identifying the reasons for the agitations. They have a constitutional right. This is a democracy. We are now in a democracy, and the norms allow people to express themselves freely, including questioning the political and economic structures of the country and their place in it. We should try to understand the basis for the agitations and calls for a new compact rather than vilify the agitators. It is disingenuous to accuse everyone who calls for restructuring as trying to break up the country. Absolutely. History tells us that that kind of cheap blackmail will not work as long as the underlying reasons for the agitations persist or remain.
My overall answer is yes. Restructuring will be a panacea of most of our current challenges. But I'd like to start off by stating what my fundamental position is. And my fundamental position is that the existing geographic space and resources of Nigeria, if appropriately governed, offers to all its constituent sections and parts distinctive benefits, benefits that justify our remaining in one country called Nigeria. So I'd like to say that that's my fundamental position, that Nigeria has distinctive benefits to offer to all its constituent parts and sections, and as such must be preserved. The overriding question is, what do I mean by if appropriately governed? I think we can all agree that the state of our country at the moment is that of grave underperformance. I don't think there's anyone who is thoroughly happy about the state of affairs in our country, especially when one thinks of the fact that at the time of our independence in 1960, by all the economic and social indices, Nigeria was slightly ahead of Malaysia. But today, Nigeria is almost a whole generation behind Malaysia. I think that can be agreed. And also, I think it can be agreed that Nigeria, in the immediate years after its independence, was a country that held out hopes and confidence in its peoples that the country would in no time make it. It was a joy then to serve Nigeria, particularly abroad. We were all very proud of being Nigerian representatives in New York, where I was from 1963 to 1966, and in all the other missions of Nigeria. My contention is that that hope and confidence, that performance, which was clearly better than what we have today, that it was rooted in the structure of governance that we had at the time. I think that at the time, for lack of better word, and if I may fall back on the hackneyed expression, true federalism was the basis of the structure of governance we had. And true federalism at the time, we had 4 regions, made sense in terms of the allocation of powers. The central government was nowhere as powerful as it has become.
Of course, you heard there, Emeka Anyaoku, and following former Vice President Atiku Abubakar's speech in a conference, and the summary is very clear. Nigeria had out hope for the future in the early times, and those hopes were rooted in the existing structure then. Emeka Anyaoku trying to explain that they were very proud when they were in foreign service that they were Nigerians. Of course, he says those hopes do not exist today. Comparing Nigeria and Malaysia, he also talked about the positioning. Of course, Atiku Abubakar, former vice president, also talked about the inherent difficulties and the challenges in this current structure, and cited the example of the police and how the states are going round the corner to set up their own security apparatus because we refused, declined, and neglected to allow a restructure in that area. Of course, we also take a quick look now at the position of some leaders in the South and the Middle West. Their take is that Nigeria must be restructured based on the recommendations from the 2014 National Conference. Let's take a look at that.
In a multi-ethnic, multicultural, and multi-religious country like Nigeria, the federal system makes enormous sense because it allows the federal units to fully look after their local affairs and to develop at their own pace. We therefore renew our loyalty, love, and fundamental support for the Federal Republic of Nigeria as one nation under God. 2. However, we are resolutely of the view that the current federal structure is unbalanced, unjust, unfair, over-centralized, unstable, anti-development, and therefore unacceptable. Accordingly, we firmly support the demand to restructure the Federation in line with the recommendations of the 2014 National Conference to restore the country to the principles of federalism enshrined in the Independence Constitution negotiated by our founding fathers. 3. For the Federation to function properly in the interests of the constituent parts, there should be fundamental devolution of powers and functions to the Federation units so that each Federation unit can effectively serve the development interests of the people. This is the central essence of a good federation, not the current over-centralization of powers and functions in the central government in Nigeria. 4. As a logical derivative, we must work out a new fiscal formula that will move Nigeria away from the current over-dependence on oil and gas revenue to a diversified economy where all federation units are encouraged to develop their abundant natural and human resources for regional and national development.
Of course, we have told you severally that the debate is on, and we get all the issues on the table for you. The whole essence of it is to generate a consensus. Let Nigerians talk about how they want their future to be and how they think that our children and our children's children can have a better Nigeria. Some say no, some say yes. The most important thing is for us to have a debate on it. But prior to 2015 general elections, the now ruling party, the All Progressives Congress, in its manifesto proposed to restructure Nigeria when and if they are voted into power. And today, most of their leaders are kicking against the recent call for restructuring. You want to ask why? Well, we like to know why the APC is also doing so as well. And yesterday, it was like we had opportunity to hear from the APC, which has now set up a committee led by the Kaduna State Governor, Nasir El-Rufai, to look into the many calls and agitation for restructuring in Nigeria. And the spokesman of the party, Bolaji Abdullahi, attempted to explain the reasons why the committee was being set up by the APC. Let's hear Bolaji.
What we are talking about is a committee that will articulate what APC means by restructuring. Because we've realized that over a couple of days now, or if not weeks, when people use the word restructuring, we are no longer sure they are talking about the same thing. And people have gone about saying APC promised restructuring. So we need to sit down as a party to also develop a shared understanding of what we mean by restructuring in our manifesto. So this committee that is set up, that will now be chaired by the governor of Kaduna, I'll give you the list of the members of the committee, is mainly to define exactly what APC mean by restructuring, so that every member will know exactly what we mean. It is not a committee to set up modalities for restructuring. I need to make that very clear.
The Igbo leaders said to achieve their decisions, all Nigerian leaders should commence a process of dialogue among themselves on the modalities of achieving this pressing question.
Sorry for that, but let's remain with the issue. A lot of discussions are on. Like we told you before, our discussion today on the program is the endless journey into the call for restructuring, starting from the Willink Commission. And we are joined in the studio by a man who has been in the forefront for the struggle for restructuring in Nigeria back in the days. He is the co-convener of the Movement for New Nigeria, MNN. and which was the joint implementation platform for the pro-NACO consensus, which basically reinstates the federal basis of Nigeria. Of course, when you hear about pro-NACO, I guess many of those who know Tony Nnadi, Abraham Adesanya, all those elders, it tailed into even the elders committee and forums all over Nigeria then that called for a consensus and that Nigeria should indeed restructure. He's a lead counsel in the 2007 suit challenging the legitimacy of the 1999 Constitution on the grounds of fraud, according to him. He's Tony Nnadi. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Now, what is your take? Let me just harvest your general take first before we come to the specifics.
Well, the situation at hand now is that Nigeria is sick unto death on account of fundamental departure from what was designed to sustain it. Nigeria became one country, one federation at independence on account of a certain level of autonomy. We'll recall that by 1953, when Enohoro moved the motion for independence, the northern region of the time blocked it. They opposed it.
They said they were not ready.
They were not ready, and the reasons, the conditions they put forward for joining in that union, because it would have been 3 countries going independent from Britain, and the 8 conditions that the then Premier of Northern Region, Ahmadu Bello, insisted upon, defined the nature of the degree of the autonomy of the regions for which the North will be prepared to now become a part of the Union. And it took all the way from that 1953 to 1960 to satisfy those conditions. To satisfy those conditions, and that became the definition of the Federation of Nigeria. Now, from that 60, it was a federation of 3 regions, each with its own constitution, and contributing to the center for the limited roles jointly assigned the center. And it was the same until 63 when Midwest came for,
after a referendum and a plebiscite.
Yes, it was in 1966 that the soldiers in January came in, pulling down all of that stronghold. And from that point in 1966, the 5 constitutions that defined the Federation of Nigeria were jettisoned, and Nigeria was unitarized. And we now, from that point to this date, it has been like the reverse gear of a federation. Unitarism is inverted federalism, in which the component units that should be the constituting are now owned by the center, and the units of federating became states that were now being created, for with no particular formula for being able to sustain themselves. And where it has landed us is that over-centralization has become the virus, responsible for all of whether it's corruption.
Were this not embarked upon by Nigerians who you can also call nationalists, who saw Nigeria after the events that led to the Civil War? Nigerians who thought, look, what actually led to the crisis then was the division that was embedded in the structure we are talking about, the structure that created autonomy for the different regions. The crisis flowing from that, was it not what the successive military tried to cure, to get everybody together in such a manner that will have nationalism in the color of Nigeria and not in the color of the ethnic groups?
Well, what you're talking about looks like a patient that needs a certain kind of intervention and maybe a surgery. And you say, okay, this is a surgery, go get the butcher man, the one that kills cow, he knows how to apply a knife, and they did the opposite of what they should have done. When those constitutions collapsed and the basis of the federation, going by Gowon's speech in July of 1966, the counter coup that followed the one of January, he was clear, he said it in that speech, that the basis of the union has collapsed. And what should have restored it was the journey to Aburi, where the leaders of the regions were to discuss how to restore that autonomy that had been truncated. And they agreed on what to do. And everybody signed up. And they came back. Somehow, new interpretations began to come.
The Aburi was a confederation arrangement.
Yes,
which
because
was also different from what we had.
Yes, what had happened was that when in January the coup happened, and the man who found himself at the head of that government, who was the most senior military officer, Aguiyi Ironsi, being a soldier, could only operate how soldiers operate, centralized command. But let me make this clear: Ironsi did not tamper with the regions as constituted. The only thing that changed was administration, in which the premiers were replaced by military governors, and a collective of those military governors became like the new parliament, the Supreme Military Council. In all of that, the regions had their autonomy remained intact.
That
their
was during
assets,
the ROC period.
Yeah, because a lot of people are now revisiting history to say that Ironsi truncated. No, he did not touch the federal the structure by the decree of number 34. It was until the point at which the regions were broken down into states by Gowon in May of 1967. That was the first time the regions were, broken up, and the center took over most of the assets that belonged there to them. So from that point on, as more states were being created, the federating units were being weakened, and the center was being strengthened, and all the economic assets that should be the business of the federating units used to work for the benefit of their various citizens, became some, like slush funds available to be frittered away, like we have seen in the last 50 years. And this matter of trying to find new definitions to restructuring, it is also simple to go back to making Nigeria a federation, and I've become like the headmaster on this matter, because at the time we convened PRONACO in 2005, it was because all other attempts to cure that ailment by other means had failed, and all attempts to persuade the government to lead the transaction also failed. Some of us who had been, even before then, engaging those in government house to say, this union will collapse if we do not rectify. We then called ourselves and said, if we could call the owners of the union, that let the Yoruba come as Yoruba, let the Ijaw come as Ijaw, let Fulani come as Fulani, let us leave government out of it. Let us leave Lugard and his, and let us see whether we have mixed up. There have been intermarriages, there are business settlements, everybody is everywhere because they're in their country. Now, we succeeded in getting 164 ethnic delegations to that, delegations, not individuals, so that we went from the first question of, gentlemen, do we really want to remain in this union, so that it will be a preponderance of yes that will take us to the how. If anybody wants to know what the restructuring should be, it is to look at the preamble to the constitution that is on the table now. You will see the definition of what we should be doing. Because it says, we the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, having solemnly resolved to live in unity as one indivisible. Then on the last line it says, do hereby give and make and give unto ourselves the following constitution. Now, there are two transactions.
Let me go into the specifics.
Yes.
Because essentially because of time.
Yes.
Let's go into it. Now, there's no doubt that the PRONACO conference must have attempted.
If you allow me land.
No,
the Yoruba that came out the other day had given, had fleshed up what we should be. Anybody who is still setting up committee to go and divine what restructuring means should look at what the Yoruba put out on 24th of June concerning what should be done. The Yoruba say, we reject the 1999 constitution as basis of the union. We are ready to rework ourselves with others into a federation as we used to be. And the first step that must happen before we go to that meeting is that we're going to ask our people in an internal referendum whether they are still willing to continue, because a federation is a union of constitutions. There's no other definition to it.
Okay, now I was going to take you deep into, so that we have it's like we have a template now.
Yes, yes.
Flowing from the PRONACO document to the Yoruba document,
yes,
and some of the fact.
All of them, because
the
movement for new Nigeria, was the implementation phase, because in Pronaco there was countrywide consensus.
Now let me take you back.
Yes.
In all these the content of these various documents that
Yes.
we have,
Yes.
Has anyone addressed the problem that led to the dismemberment of the regions that created the unitary that we now? Has anybody seen the defects? Did any of these documents have addressed the defects? Because if we are saying we should go back to them, we should know where we are going back to.
Yes.
Were there challenges at that time? What were the defects of the regional governments vis-a-vis the one at the center? What was it that led to that?
The collapse
in
the first place.
Because when we are going back there, we should know what led to it.
We did a detailed diagnosis before we went into the prescription that led to the treatment that became Pronaco. Now, let me take them. There were 3 regions. I could even take the 4 if time permits. In the first one, in the north, for instance, in the northern region, the Willings Commission. All of what we remember about Willings Commission is Niger Delta that had to be developed. That wasn't the only thing. Willings Commission dealt with minorities. In the Middle Belt, for instance, in the northern region of the time, there was the question of Sharia. The leaders of the north wanted Sharia for northern region. The Middle Belt, mostly Christians, said they would not be part of that region and go into independence as part of that region if Sharia was to be. So therefore, they wanted to be Middle Belt region to stand as their own going into independence. The compromise that the Willings Commission then established was to say, we will remove Sharia from the table. We will instead have something they call, they introduce the penal code, so that the Christians in the north will not. So that became the basis of the Middle Belt remaining a part of the north. But what did we see thereafter? Those who, those who were privy to that fundamental consensus agenda item began to shift the goalpost to the point where, you remember the thief riots and all of, those people continue to get decimated by those who wanted to overrun them. And it hasn't stopped to date. Today, you see them sweeping.
What is the solution?
The solution...
Well, because if you are asking us to go back...
No. It is in knowing that these were, as it is with the North, the same thing you see elsewhere. Because what we have to do now is to complete the decolonization process. It was incomplete decolonization that led to January 66. If you remember, it didn't begin with January 66.
So if we had, for instance, if we had the Middle Belt sitting on their own, without Sharia, and we have the North with their full Sharia and running, we could probably not, we will not have the problem that we have. Under the new propositions, how do we hope to sustain this? What
we did in Pronaco was to have a limited number of regions that would federate, agreeing among themselves from base, because you build a house from the foundation. A federation, get the logic, a federation is a union of constitutions. Nigeria became one country when 3 constitutions unionized in 1960. The 4th one joined by plebiscite in 1963. We went into this tunnel where we're trying to pull out from when we threw away those 4 federating and began to do things upside down. If we want to cure the situation, therefore, it is to restore federating units. It doesn't have to be the 4 that went into coma. It must now be the Jaw, the Urobo, the Shekiri sitting in one side to agree on in what formation they want to federate with others. And then the Yoruba, almost homogeneous, we don't have a problem there. The Middle Belt, bound by all kinds of things. Their languages may be many, but we've been involved sufficiently to, have a fair idea of what they might, might bind. Then the one that has become a new problem, I wish the camera can focus a little on this. The new problem that has been added to other problems is that 12 contiguous states of the far north, the Muslim north, adopted Sharia in year 2000 and began to implement it to the torment of those who are not Muslim. In the nature of the fundamental nature of
let me see that. Maybe we can take it if my cameraman can take it.
The broken map you see there is where the fallback. What will happen if we won't find common ground? Because there must be an end to waiting in this matter. things are now, you see the people shouting Biafra here, and the other ones doing OPC there, and the ones doing Boko Haram. The Boko Haram, for all you care, some, you may call them any name you want, but they say they want Sharia in place of democracy. That's their single demand. How am I to distinguish between that and the 12 contiguous states of the FANO that passed Sharia simultaneously in year 2000? They want Sharia. Shekau goes to Chibok and abducts girls. We saw him on CNN advertising those girls for sale. Then there's Sani Yerima sitting in the Senate who went to Egypt in year 2012 or so to buy a 13-year-old girl for marriage. And he stands in the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to say that his Sharia permits that there's no lower age limit for marriage.
For maturity, that maturity is not defined by age.
So how am I supposed to make a distinction between what motivates Shekau and what motivates Yerima in pursuing Sharia? Yerima chopped off people's hands in Zamfara, pursuing Sharia. Yerima goes to take 13-year-old girl in Egypt in pursuit of Sharia. And Shekau, blows up heads and limbs in pursuit of Sharia and goes to Chibok. Therefore, it has become a clash of civilizations. We must find that's a new precondition for even returning to the Union, because what has happened is that you remember in 2007.
Is that not the reason people are getting worried that the clamor for restructuring, the way it is going, it could actually lead to dismembering of Nigeria? Is that not the fears?
No, we insist that we must now define that Nigeria to be inclusive, because the Nigeria that is defined by 1999 Constitution can no longer hold. This 1999 Constitution is like apartheid constitution in which there is master, there is servant. And because the master imposed it, the servant lost every. Niger Delta is crying over their oil. Somebody by decree took those, because those assets belong to the regions. It became the asset of the center. The port in Port Harcourt was asset of Eastern region in Emma Okpara's days. When Awolowo was in Western region, we knew he had the charge over the assets of Western region to now deploy them to solve in their priorities. Education was prioritized and all of that. All of those things have been truncated and turned upside down, and we're saying that if the title document by which Nigeria is holding the entire territory is this constitution that is a product of forgery and fraud, because it says we the people made it, when we never met. The story
there
of
was a constituent conference.
No.
There was a conference.
No. The story of Absalam Abaka is written right here in decree number 24. He says he set up a committee, a constitution debate committee that went around, came back to him and his Supreme Military Council. They added and subtracted. I'm showing you in black and white, and this is the story.
Were Nigerians?
No. They didn't even claim constituent conference. They said they went round, and most people began to say they wanted to go back to 1979. It's written here. And in going back to 1979, even that 1979 with the Constituent Assembly, because Nigeria has been trying to build a house from the roof all the while. 1977 Constituent Assembly didn't put the final seal on what became 1979 Constitution. Remember that in September 1978, after the clean draft had been submitted by the Constituent Assembly, Obasanjo went on national television to announce that they announced 17 amendments. Many will not remember this. The Constituent Assembly didn't accept that the states that were created to truncate the regions should be retained. The Constituent Assembly didn't accept that presidential system should, because the presidential system will of necessity, accumulate power at the center, and that is what we are suffering from now. So many things, and all of what, because there was a draft prepared for the Constituent Assembly to work with. Murtala Mohammed commissioned it through Rotimi Williams, who engaged Professor Ben Wabweze when they couldn't find other people to do. They wrote what they wanted as the Charter of Victory in the War of 1967 to 1970. So we began on a wrong foundation. Where do we go from here?
Like we always ask.
Yes. What do we do?
Those who come on this program, we always ask, after articulating all these ideas, they say, look, here we are.
Yes.
The 1999 Constitution, whether like you describe it, is forgery.
Yes, it is.
And a document that Nigerians didn't put their because they say we the people, and
it lies. Yes.
You don't believe that there was
the story of the author tells all of it.
The question we always ask is:
yes,
we have a Nigeria that is set out. We have the ground norm, the 1999 Constitution.
Yes.
We have the National Assembly.
Yes.
We have the people. We have the structures. Where do we go from here?
What we do is that South Africa was in this same dilemma for many years, 80 years. he took Frederick de Klerk, and history is beckoning right now. There was Botha, who was president, who took ill, and Frederick de Klerk stepped into the shoes. The first thing Frederick de Klerk did was to acknowledge that the apartheid constitution of master and servant, which was being resisted by Mandela and the blacks of South Africa, could no longer sustain the society, because this constitution is being hacked at from every quarter.
So
everybody.
Let's stop there first.
Yes.
You want
a declaration.
You want a declaration by
that we have not made.
Who
a
has that
constitution.
power?
Yes, yes.
Who has that power to do that?
The president is in a position to do exactly what Frederick de Klerk did.
Does he have that power?
No. The alternative. Yes. The alternative is that Nigeria will collapse.
No.
The alternative, if we do not cure a patient that is in dire need of cure, that patient will die. Nigeria is that patient. I've been on this matter for about 20 years. There's no corner of the country that we've not gone to bring people.
We are looking at how to go about it. Does the power lie in the president to
There's a template. There's a template on the table. If we define what we want to solve, it is that this attempt to evade the truth that will define what we have to solve that has led to all of this compounding.
Let's go ahead. Let's process. Let's proceed.
Yes.
If we have a president who is willing,
yes.
President Muhammadu Buhari comes to, of course, after all,
he was part of the northern delegation that came to see what we did in Pronaco.
The APC manifesto actually promised a restructuring. He comes up today to pronounce that there's a defective
fundamental defect.
Yeah, fundamental defect.
Let me read just one. Let me
show
you what we have to do.
Yes. Just hold on because of time. He makes a pronouncement today that there's a fundamental defect in the constitution.
Yes.
That will not take us away from where we are. It will just be a mere declaration that is not supported by any existing legal framework. So where do we go from here?
Where we go from there is once that admission is made, we then go into the process of distilling what will replace this. We're not anarchists. We say South Africa went into Kodesha. A transitioning period. He sets
up a committee.
Well, he can set up a committee or commission. It's a discussion that has to be from the base. The owners of the land, those who are saying that they no longer wish to be in the union.
On what basis are we going to do? Because I'm taking you to the national
assembly. The Yoruba, for instance, will be a country of 55 million people without any further discussion if Nigeria fails to call that meeting within the time it can be called. From what they have done already, they say they reject this as the basis and that they are going to internal referendum to ask their people whether they still want to go elsewhere. As we speak, they have draft constitution, they have integrated their processes. As far as they are concerned, in rejecting this constitution, Nigeria no longer exists. You are now to invite them to come and rework themselves back with other people.
But you see, the
same situation in the East.
Tony, where many people will be wondering where we will go with this kind of formula, with the template you are trying to, is that those who are afraid that Nigeria will be balkanized, Nigeria would go back to
if we agree, if the demand of three-quarters, all of those who, like the southwest, the eastern part,
if they don't agree,
three-quarters of the country is in agreement right now.
If they don't agree, let us give.
If they don't agree, we will seamlessly become countries that will relate in new protocols the next day.
Is that what?
If they fail, but they already agree. The calamity is that they already agree, a majority already agree, a small minority is insisting it cannot be so. And that small minority are the same ones imposing Sharia, the same ones insisting on feudalism. Others are working for democracy. They are saying it cannot be so, that we are born to rule you. We own your asset. Our cow must feed on your farm. Your oil and gas must be our asset. Those are the kind of things people are reacting to. And they say, if after 50 years of waiting to discuss, you say it's non-negotiable, and it must be as you impose it, only marginal changes you are contemplating, you are going to find a situation where people will lose interest in the union. Let me also bring in the agitations that are likely to produce new situations we have to contend with. Many may think Nnamdi Kanu and his Biafra campaign is just some hallucination. No, the peoples of the territory, and it doesn't stop with the Igbo, the states they created. I don't know what Imo State or Abia State or River State is. They were all products of this, hijack and subversion of sovereignty. It is those sovereignties that must now be allowed to go to discuss what they want to do with themselves. And if we fail to do that, they are going to, under this United Nations instrument that entitle each of them to self-determination, they may have to take steps.
All right.
We are pursuing a referendum now.
I just sincerely believe that it's you have to come back on the program so that we can have the time to interrogate the ideas that you have raised up. Because if you ask me,
yes,
and you ask many of those who have watched, this formula could well be a recipe to redefine Nigeria, but many will fear that it is a recipe to actually
if we go and agree, once we agree,
that's why I think we'll have opportunity to bring you back.
Okay.
And I have been speaking with a man who has seen it. From what you have heard from him, you will agree with me that he's been around. He has all the figures. He has the analysis. He has many of the processes
that can deliver this result.
Tony Nnadi, we want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And when we come back in another 24 hours, we'll have another guest and another talking on the issue of the future of Nigeria. My name is Okiri Agbonsoremi. Thanks for staying with us.